Well, hello everyone. The photography balancing act, the ever present balancing act between creativity and saleability. Are you spending too much time focusing on creativity and not enough on saleability? Meaning, are you spending so much time on your images, but you're not actually selling your images and you can't understand why? Are you wondering why your clients aren't raving about every single one of the photos because you've put so much effort and thought into them? Are you starting to feel a little resentful about your art not being appreciated or not being paid and appreciated for your art versus the prices that you really are looking for? This is what we are going to talk about today. And it is something that I think a lot of businesses, especially with photography, tend to not understand how to do the balance. This week's Tuesday Talks, we are going to talk about the balance between creativity and saleability. Unless your client is a wedding photographer themselves, which doesn't necessarily happen very often, the balance doesn't come easily, right? Because you're dealing with people who really might not understand the fine tunes of every single thing you're doing. This is where resentment can come in, and this is where burnout can happen. We all get into this business because we love photos and we love photography, not necessarily because we want to deal with marketing and sales and all those scary business words. So I'm here to make the scary words of business less scary and more fun. So this week, we are going to be talking about the ultimate photography balancing act, creativity versus saleability. Creativity, i.e. your art. Saleability, i.e. business. And we're going to break this talk into two different sections. One, knowing when to focus on creativity and when to focus on sales and saleability and business in your career. And then two is going to be some tips and tricks on how to focus on each when it comes to finding the balance without losing your love of photography and your burnout from business, which can definitely happen. And it can happen faster than you think. If you, again, got into this business because you love photos and then all of a sudden you're not doing the photos, because once you get into the true photography business, you realize, as I'm sure you know this, photography is like the iceberg. What you actually do behind the camera is this much, and what you do down underneath the water is really what supports. That's the thing to focus on. It's not that you have to do it. It's that this part underneath the water is going to support so you can enjoy this much, that much more. So let's get started. First, knowing when to focus on creativity versus saleability. First, we're going to talk about creativity. So again, this isn't about every time you have to be super, super creative. This is about when you should be really focusing on it. Because if you're only focusing on creativity, of course, there's the few incredible artists who are going to get paid $20,000 for one incredible photo. But chances are that's not where you're going to start. And that's not what's going to maintain and sustain your business. You're just going to start to feel like a little resentful and tired. When to focus on the creativity is when you need to refresh your portfolio. So refresh your portfolio with unique and standout images. We're going to talk a little bit more about portfolio later. You want to have a good balance of the unique standout images, but also the ones that people just really need and want. So that's one time when you're focusing on creativity in your business, when you're doing it for yourself and you're focusing on this. I always suggest taking your portfolio, taking all the pictures you've taken. To be honest, I stole this idea from Joe Busing, who's an incredible wedding photographer, and I've heard him speak a few times, and he always says this in his talk. Get a glass of wine, get all your favorite images that you can think of, maybe more than just your favorite, because this is your point in which you find your favorite. You find the ones that really feel like your brand. They feel like what you want. So what you put out there in your website and in your portfolio is what you're going to attract. So this is where that balance aspect comes in. You want to look at, like, if you don't want to shoot golf course weddings, don't put golf course weddings on your website. If you want to shoot really incredible, gorgeous, artistic photos, put them on there. Also know group photos, inevitable. You can't be super creative with a group photo, but they're needed. So you still need to have that balance of the super creative and the just has to happen when you're photographing a wedding type of stuff. Also, focus on the creativity when you're working with clients who value this artistic expression and are willing to experiment. So this is, again, where communication is going to come in. You're going to ask your clients and kind of get a vibe from them, what they like, what they don't like. But when you have that client in front of you who you know you can just push the envelope with, have fun. explain to them what you're doing, talk about it. And then also, of course, do personal projects. When you have downtime, when it's not the busy season, this is where you can be super creative and you can feed your soul. Don't forget to feed your soul with your creativity. It doesn't have to be all for your business. You can go out and have fun. I know for me, I have my film camera, and I kind of have like a rule that if I'm going to be doing a photo shoot in Bali in my off season in the winter, I do it on film just because it feeds my soul and it's fun for me to go back to. So now let's talk about when to focus on saleability. When booking rates are low and you need to attract more clients. Yes, you hate to hear it, and I hate to say it. And of course, the ideal situation is always what you put out, you get back, and stick to your avatar. This is the misconception, is that you should only book your ideal client. Sometimes you just gotta book other people. There's a part to just the reality of staying in business if you're having a tight year. Still keep your boundaries up and still know what's important to you, but keep them a little loose, not too tight. If you're only doing this very niched creative work, you're not going to get all the clientele that you need. Think of it, 80% of your clients you want to be your ideal client, but you still got 20% to play with. And sometimes when those booking rates are down, you're allowed to do this. Focus on saleability when you're engaging with clients who prefer things that are a little bit more traditional and a little bit more safe options. You're going to want to look and gear towards the business aspect, gear towards what they want, gear towards that what every wedding is doing. You'll get to know, again, the vibe and feel of the client. That's when you're going to focus on that. And then also focus on saleability during peak wedding seasons when efficiency and volume are crucial. When you're just trying to shoot as much as you can and make the money in those peak seasons while you can, don't worry about spending every single waking moment on that perfect little edit, because that's not a really great use of time. And really, when it comes to creativity versus saleability, you're looking at the balance of time as well, because you are only one person. Or even if you have a team of people, you still have a limited amount of time and you want to use that time efficiently, especially when it comes to the peak season and you're just trying to get as much done as you can before the season ends. Okay? So there's a little bit about when to focus on each. Now I'm going to go through about 6 different ways you can start to balance, how you can find the balance. How do I know what someone wants? How do I know if I should be focusing on creativity or saleability? And how do I figure this out? Create consultations to balance vision and needs. This is important. Create client consultations. You want to make sure you understand your client's expectations. You want to know the expectations, and you want to find that happy medium between finding out your client's needs and your own. This is kind of, again, that balance between creativity and saleability. Here's how you would do this. Here's how you would figure out what your client wants. Because we've talked a little bit about this before. Your client's never done this. They probably don't know how to communicate in the words of photography. So this is how you do it. You schedule in-depth consultations to understand the client's visions. You want to talk, you want to show them photos, you want to have a conversation about how they feel about photography. If they're been to art galleries, get personal, understand who they are so you get to see and feel what they need. You want to present creative ideas that align with their preferences and needs. So as you start to understand what they are looking for and what they need, you start to create their ideas, their creative ideas. This is a way you can actually bring in creativity. Educate your clients. Explain to them the benefits of certain creative approaches for, say, a better result. Let's say Dutch angles, which I don't even think they're calling them Dutch angles anymore, and it's coming back into popularity. For a while there it wasn't, but that's when the picture is just tilted a bit. Or say blur, because blur is very popular, which is a whole different conversation. You want to explain, so say, example, you're like, oh, I want to show movement. I want to show action, or I'm purposely got really close up and chopped off the heads because I wanted to show the emotional depth, right? Things like this so they understand, oh, this isn't a mistake. It's the creative choice you're making. Because some people just don't know and they just need to be explained to and told. Another really, really great way to do this is by creating a client questionnaire. So you want to develop a questionnaire that captures the client's aesthetic preferences. You want to get them to write down what they like, because they don't know. It's kind of one of the examples when I get on a call with a client and I say, do you have any questions for me? They're usually like, no, not really. But then they really don't understand what's going on. So it's your job to ask them questions, and it's your job to Ask them the questions that lead to the answers that you need, right? Like, do you like light and airy or dark and moody? They kind of know what that means, but if you show them a visual, they're like, oh, I definitely like this versus this, right? They don't know how to say, oh, by the way, I'm a very much a light and airy type of client and I really want this. They might, because people know a little bit more than they used to, but you don't know for sure. And this is something you want to definitely know for sure. So develop this questionnaire. Use these responses to then tailor the creative approach when you're meeting with them. So then you now know how to go about and say, here's what you really liked. What do you think about this creative version of this? And they're going to say yes or no. Again, you want to do this before the event happens, because you don't want to do a photo shoot and have you end up assuming what they like when it's not all what they like. So be creative with this aspect. And you want to balance their preferences, again, with your artistic approach. Them versus you, and bringing them together. So now let's talk about your balanced portfolio. So another way in which you want to make sure you have creativity, and you don't want to spend so much time on your creativity and your art that you're not paying enough time on your sales, because at that point, if they disconnect, you're not going to make a sale. This is where your sales don't happen. This is one of the things you can look at if you're like, why am I not booking weddings? This might be one of the things. You pigeonhole yourself so much that you're turning off clients that they don't even want to reach out to you. You want to still get them in the door. So when you look at your portfolio, you want to have a good balance of the general of what they want, but then those awesome creative ones as well. You want to regularly update your portfolio with the mix of the creative and more the commercially successful, if you will. Commercially meaning your clients they're just the general public. You want to highlight the work that showcases both. If you want more artistic, highlight those, just have the rest in there and have them available for clients to see by using an online gallery. And you want to also use client testimonials. You want to reinforce the saleability of your creative work so that if people are like, oh my gosh, I love that they did this, because if it's just coming from the photographer, it doesn't mean as much as if they have a client review that the potential client looks at and goes, oh, I'm kind of like that person, and that person liked this creative thing, so maybe I will like it or look into it as well. This is actually a really good way to utilize Instagram and online gallery. So a really great way to kind of figure out where your clients like and don't like and what they are leaning towards as far as the commercialability aspect is when you look at IG and you think, oh, this photo really performed well. Another great way to do it is to go to your online gallery, like Shootproof, and see what they liked. So with every gallery, there's a section in Shootproof that says favorites, and you could go and look at the favorites and see, oh, wow, this one was in 5 different people's favorites, and this one was in 0. So like at that point you see, oh, that's a favorite photo. I have to remember that. And the more you go through your galleries and you see, you might have a common denominator, and that would be your saleability image. Hopefully it might also be your creative image as well, but at this point, you know what a photographer sees in the slightest little change and what the general public sees is very different. And you want to find that happy medium and not be balanced one way or the other. If you're focused too much on saleability, you're going to start to feel resentful and miss and not like photography anymore. And if you focus too much on photography, you're going to start to feel resentful that your art's not being appreciated. The balance is key to longevity in your business. So let's go back to social media strategy a bit. You want to also, when you're looking at your social media, do a showcase of both. You want to show some artistic stuff, and you want to show things that clients can and will engage with. You want to post a mix of super artistic things that you love, and then also things that are client-focused content. For example, you might show a really beautiful, well-lit, crazy lit, the rule of thirds, shallow depth of field, blah, blah, blah photo. And then the next photo might be a girl just standing with her bridesmaids laughing, right, in a straight line. They both serve their purposes, and you want to have a mix when it comes to the general public, because then they can see, wow, this person does this photographer, and they still get this as well. Use Instagram stories to share the creative process and the client testimonials. So again, going back to the client testimonials, use those. Share your creative process. So when someone sees this crazy, cool, artistic photo, maybe do a little reel about, hey, this is how I lit it, or this is what this looked like. So then they can also appreciate the artistic credit. They can give you the credit you deserve for being that artistic. and unique versus just going, right? Another really important thing when it comes to finding these balances, because the industry is constantly changing. And I know we talked about this a couple months ago when I was at the conferences in Vegas, that it's so important to continue your education and also consulting with peers. Because if you have peer photography group that are located all over the country, all over the world, all over the state, everyone has a different market and everyone's bringing a different piece to the pie. And you can learn so much about, well, this is what I'm doing to maybe systemize your artistic endeavors and find this. And you can also just have that like conversation with people about how they're dealing with it, because it's a balancing act that we've had as forever. Art versus business. There's always that saying that artists aren't good at business, which I think is so false. It's actually fun, and business can be really creative and fun as well, but we're not told that. So then let's go back and talk to your peers about, how are you dealing with this? How have you pulled back? How have you, like some people might say, I'm going to do everything how I usually do it, and then I'm going to pull out 10% of the images and really get in there and be super creative with the post-production or whatever that is. They set a limit. They always do it, but maybe they set a limit. Or, there's different ways to be creative that way. So there's different ways you can continue your education and consulting with peers. You can attend workshops that can focus on both creative techniques and business skills at the same time and how to combine them. You can implement new creative skills in personal projects first. You can start doing it in the creative personal projects first, so that way you're not taking away from the business aspect. You're building the skill level in this other area, maybe your off season, before you start introducing it to your actual business, which might be a little scary. And then apply business strategies you've learned to streamline your operations. Like that's more the business stuff. If you can make the business stuff easier and more streamlined, then it's easier for you to spend more time on the artistic creative without losing touch of the sale aspect. And then finally, you've talked about your education. Now it's time to educate the client. So it's important to educate the client about the artistic importance versus budget concerns. So when it comes down to it, educate clients on the importance of this creative elements, because within their budget constraints, because people see budget, people might see creative, and people might go, oh, I can't afford. Educate why. Like for me, show examples of the creativity and how this can enhance their wedding. Your experience in this can be better. And again, when it comes to selling photography for yourself, it's so important that you believe it yourself too, that you are the best match for this person you're speaking to. And if you're not the best match, kind of don't stress too much. Again, who's your ideal client? Really work hard and know the heart connection between your perfect match. And this, I tend to say oftentimes, you're better to have a photographer that you really, really, really love and connect with, artistically, creatively, personality-wise, sale-wise, all those things, for a shorter amount of time than you are to have someone you're kind of meh about for a longer period of time, because you can really get all the photos you really need in a shorter amount of time than the client might understand, which again comes down to client education. There's so much client education when it comes to selling wedding photography, and also believing in yourself and your prices. Obviously, you need to understand the market a little bit more, and this is where things give and take. If it's a slim year, if it's not peak season, there's things to work around. If you're really just trying to book, this is where, again, you lean away from the creativity and more into the saleability, like we talked a little bit earlier. And then you can also say someone's like, I can't afford you, you're too expensive, you're too creative, it's too much. Offer flexible payment plans. You can make a high value aspect a lot more doable by being creative with the packages and making them more accessible as well. Thanks.